name's Colleen Gardner. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about and provide you with a retirement system update. I love the Southern Tier. It's been a while since I've been out there, and I hope you all are doing well, especially during these challenging times. So let's go to these are sort of a general number of items that I plan to cover today. There are a lot of slides, and I provided Richard with a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, which are which I said I'd be happy to share with everyone. I'm not going to drain every slide and go through it, but some of it you may want to go back to get a little bit more information. But I understand you're interested in knowing our membership and retirement trends. I'll talk about the funding for the retirement system and how employer contributions are set. Also talk about some of the things the actuary looks at to determine the rates and where rates are going, how the fund has been doing. We also have a number of things that we've done to assist our members and employers with issues related to COVID-19. We're also in the process of replacing our legacy retirement system for both members and employers, and providing more opportunities for you all to be able to do business with us electronically. So I'll mention a little bit about that, as well as our new enhanced reporting system. And I know many of you are clerks. I'll just mention a little bit about reporting elected and appointed officials. So just this is a snapshot of our retirement system. I think we're the only retirement system that has a fiscal end date of March 31st of each year. It's the state fiscal year, so that it can be very interesting. So for instance, when the pandemic started in March, our retirement fund was headed toward a record year, but then in the midst of the pandemic, we ended up having a negative return at the end of March 31st, 2020. But then lo and behold, this past March 31st of 2021, we had a record-setting return of over 33% for our retirement system. So sometimes the dates are different, because I know teachers and the New York City plans end on June 30th. But the bottom line is we're well diversified, and we're in for the long term. And that's important because over, as you see, 1.1 million members, retirees, and beneficiaries rely on us, as well as you as our employers, our partners in providing these benefits rely on us to provide services to your members. And we have two retirement systems. I'll probably be referring to them as ERS, which is our bigger system, or has more members in it. It's Employees Retirement System, and then PFRS, which is our Police and Fire Retirement System. So right now, the audited value of our system is $251.1 billion. And even though the value of our fund continues to go up, of course, we have more, we have new members, and we have our retirees continue to grow. So our obligations continue to grow as well. So, we're a defined benefit plan, which means that we provide a fixed pension for life, and the size of the pension is based on a number of different things, including, someone's service credit, their final average earnings, and depending on their plan. And, we have almost 300 plan combinations. The plan will also determine what their benefit will be. We're not a defined contribution plan, which tends not to have a guarantee in the benefits. But we are a qualified plan under the IRS. I just wanted to share with you some recent studies by the National Institute on Retirement Security. They've polled and surveyed public sector employees. And what this lays out are all the benefits that public employees see in receiving a defined benefit pension. And in fact, 86, it's not here, but it's 86% of public employees have said that having a defined benefit pension is one of the reasons that they stay in their jobs. And I know we've been hearing about the great resignation during the pandemic. One of the important things that keep people in public sector positions is, the benefit package, and pensions are a big part of it. What we're also seeing, surprisingly, that the one group of workers that really responds well and thinks pension benefits are important are millennials. I think one, because many of them lived through the last recession, the Great Recession. A lot of them are concerned about Social Security, and in private sector jobs, they're less likely to have a defined benefit pension. But millennials overall think that having a defined benefit pension is very important. Interestingly, the public also has been generally supportive of defined benefit pensions. One, because they see that that public sector employees contribute to their benefits. They also see that that in many cases, pensions compensate for lower pay compared to similar jobs in the private sector, and also because many public sector jobs have some risks involved, especially like during the pandemic. Many public sector workers have been working throughout the pandemic. So those are sort of some updated survey items. And then, this is just some general differences between defined benefit pension plans and defined contribution plans. I know Comptroller DiNapoli is a strong supporter of the defined benefit plan. There is about a 48% lower cost associated with a defined benefit plan. And some of the reasons is because when you pool all the people in a defined benefit plan, you don't have what they call longevity risk. If I'm just contributing towards my own plan, I have to think about how long am I going to live, and then the other issue is, as I get older, I don't want to be in investments that are so risky. So, but with a defined benefit plan, you have a constant asset allocation. And generally there are lower investment costs. It's less expensive to administer. One of the things people talk about in a defined contribution plan is that, well, it's portable, but the thing we should remember about our plan is that if you go to work for a public sector employer, it's portable, being a member of the retirement system is portable as well. The other difference is employers do bear more of the investment risk. If investments go down, employers are who we have to turn to ask for additional funds to support the plan, versus in a defined contribution plan, the employer doesn't really have much risk at all. But the thing with being in a multi-employer plan is you're sharing the risk with all other employers as well. So our benefits are very, that being said, our benefits are fairly modest. This is a snapshot of the average pension, and it's looking at a difference between 2017 and 2021. As you can see, as people's salaries tend to increase, pensions that we pay out increase, and you do see a difference between the overall average pension that we pay out and versus the average for the new employees, and that means the new employees who retired in the last fiscal year. Of course, their amounts are going up. So we're seeing that as a trend, and we have to factor that into the costs of the plan. But again, if you look at the pensions that we pay out, still having six-figure pensions are very rare. Less than 2% of our members are in that category. But you know, for the most part, people have fairly modest pensions. So it's important when we do pay out the pensions to think about where that money goes. And about 79% of our retirees continue to live in New York State. And this is a breakdown, and you see out in Western New York, Southern Tier, we pay out over 1.6 million in pensions every year. And that has an economic impact. And what we do see is that retirees tend to spend money on things like on their local businesses. And this is a similar snapshot, even though I think our retirees are probably about 3% of the overall population. We pay out more than that in local taxes. Just to give you an idea, this shows all the retirements that we've had for the last 2 years. Since January of 2020. I know folks have been wondering about how many retirements we've been getting since the pandemic started. We did see a slight decrease right after the pandemic started with people retiring, although we do have sort of a seasonality to retirements. We see a lot at the end of a year. We see many of our retirements are in June because about a third of our employers are school districts. But we did see in 2020, at first slowing down a little bit of retirements, but then we started seeing a gradual uptick. And we know there were some local employers who had offered some incentives. Over the past year, 2021, we did see a huge increase, especially in June, in school districts and in the number of retirements. And over the difference in over the years, we had like 400 new retirements over the previous year. So the other thing to keep in mind is, you know, given baby boomers and the age and service retirement capability of our members, we probably about 25% of our ERS members and police and fire members can probably retire right now. And a lot of it is based on the demographics of our members. So just a little bit more about membership. Our members there have been 2 different tiers since 2010. First was tier 5 and now tier 6, and tier 6 members make up more than half of our members at this point as a single tier. And you should know the tier 5 benefits aren't as lucrative, probably the wrong word to use, as previous tiers. And they're about 84% of the value of tier 4, for instance. And the cost benefit difference between tier 6 and tier 4 is tier 6 is about 61% of the value of a tier 4 membership. So that means in terms of contributions, when we figure out an employer contributions, we look at not only the plans that you participate in, but we also look at the demographics of your employees and what tiers they're in, and the contribution rates for a tier 6 and a tier 5 employee will be less than the cost of a tier 4 employee. And right now, while tier 6 members are growing as far as the quantity of them, they're still, because many of them are in the early stages of their careers and not making as much money, their percentage of payroll is starting to increase, but still, you've got higher paid tier 3, 4 members who tend to make, still take a large or represent a large part of an employer's payroll. And this just tells you where our members work. The state is our largest employer, followed by school districts, but then, we have lots of folks in counties, cities, and towns across the state. And this is a snapshot of the new members that have been coming in. And, we've got employers who, constantly enrolling new workers. Again, at first during the recession, I'm sorry, not the recession. Well, actually during the recession, we saw a downturn in employment. And in the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a downturn in employment, but employment and new enrollments are starting to uptick again. So before I go forward, are there any questions? Okay. All right, so I'll move on to funding and contributions. So pensions have a number of different, our pensions have a number of different sources. Generally, over the last 20 years, 23% of a pension dollar comes from employer contributions, 2% come from employee contributions, and that will is starting to increase as far as employee contributions, because we've got the first 4 tiers are no longer contributory. Tier 5 and tier 6 members contribute for their careers, so that number will change. And then 75% of our pension dollars comes from investment returns. So the actuary takes a lot of different information to put together to try to figure out what the optimal employer contribution rate is every year. So first they start out with the actuary determines how much money is needed in the fund today to pay benefits in the future. And our actuary always says that payment for pensions is, you're paying for a promise. So it's figuring out what promises were made and when we expect to pay them out and how much we'll need to pay for those benefits. We take out, we subtract the value of the pension fund as of the end of a fiscal year. We take out the anticipated employee contributions, and then whatever's left over, it's the amount we turn to you to ask for to pay for the benefits. So pretty much employers help us make up the difference and make sure that we have the money we need to pay out these benefits over the working lives of their employees. So the actuary estimates the future value of the benefits and factors in a whole bunch of things, both economic items as well as demographic assumptions. They look at inflation. They look at the mortality rates of our retirees and our members. We also look at trends as far as salaries. And, so the actuary makes a number of assumptions. The assumptions are often based on our actual experience. And every 5 years, the actuary does a review of the actual experience to work on estimates for the future and to determine what assumptions we need to make to determine what the future value of the benefits should be. So then we take the future value of the benefits and it gets what we call discounted to today's dollars. And we set what we call the assumed or expected rate of return on pension investments. Because investments are such a big part of how we pay for benefits, we need to figure out how much we expect to get in return on our investments. And the result, when we come up with these values, the actuary determines the present value of benefits. This is a lot of actuary speak right now. But so the employer pays based on the rates for the plans that they've chosen. And the rates are set by, as I mentioned before, a tier and plan, because all the plans provide for different benefits. So the assumed rate of return is an important part of the equation, and it impacts employer contribution rates. Every 5 years, the actuary is required to recommend to the controller what the assumed rate of return should be. And overall, across the nation, what you're seeing is the assumed rate of return coming down because there's been a lot of volatility from year to year in investment returns. And the assumption is that returns will not necessarily be as big as they were in the past. So we want to have a reasonable assumed rate of return rate that reflects our mix of investments so that we can provide stable contribution rates to employers. So, we don't want to be, bouncing up and down whenever there's a change in the market. We want to assume what we think the steady state will be as far as investments. So the actuary monitors the investment returns and forecasts. So to give you an example, back with the actuarial valuation in April 1, 2019, the actuary, looked at our investment returns and looked at a whole bunch of studies and determined that we needed to lower our assumed rate of return from 7% to 6.8% because we anticipated a lower return environment. This change first affected employer contribution rates in 2021. And by itself, typically, if we lower the assumed rate of return, that means we don't think our investments will be as high. That means we need to turn to employers to make up the difference. And typically, when we lower the assumed rate of return, that increases employer contribution rates. The controller is very sensitive to keeping rates as reasonable as possible, but also making sure that he has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure we have enough funding. But one of the reasons we chose that date to lower the assumed rate of return is we were able to offset the increases in employer contribution rates by other gains that we had been seeing. And we had some gains in the mortality and with seeing more new entrants coming in who were less costly. So in that year, we had stable contribution rates as a result. It was only there was a slight increase in police and fire. So as I mentioned before, the value of the retirement fund impacts contribution rates 2 fiscal years after. And generally, the value of the fund for 5 years is smoothed out and impacts employer contribution rates every year, so that there's constantly a smoothing out, so that if there is a year where investments are low, it doesn't have a huge impact on employers in a given year. So generally, we do 5-year smoothing. So going back to the pandemic and March 31st of 2020, we had the negative 2.6% return. That resulted in rates for this past, for the current fiscal year we're in now, of fiscal year 2022, average rates that increased. And in ERS, it increased by 1.6%, and police and fire by 3.9%. There is a program called the Contribution Stabilization Program, which does allow employers to amortize a portion of the increase in rates, but and employers could do that. Certain employers could do that in this past fiscal year, but I'll talk about that program in a little bit. And there was a tax cap exclusion for the increase in the police and fire rates. This I won't go through this, but this is a gain loss analysis that the actuary includes in his report every year. It does explain, it takes your fiscal year 2021 contribution, and it shows all the different factors that the actuary looks at to come up with the 2022 rate. So it shows the 5-year smoothing, the actual investment returns we had versus what the assumed rate of return was. It shows mortality, but it's a good way of looking at it and figuring out how we got to the average contribution rate that we got to. Going back to and fast forwarding to the value of the fund as of the end of March 31st, 2021, the value of the fund, oh, actually, I'm sorry, that's a typo. It was 258.1 billion. And the overall, we had a record return of 33.55%. And that will result in contributions for fiscal year 2023, the ones that are due February 1st of 2023, or for those of you folks who get the discount for paying by December 15th, and actually probably about 85 to 90% of our employers do that, is the average contribution rate will decrease significantly to 11.6% in ERS and 27% in police and fire. So let me talk a little bit about the assumed rate of return. The actuary had recommended to the controller another reduction in the assumed rate of return for fiscal year 2023. We do, in addition to doing the actuarial study every 5 years, we do a long-term asset allocation every 5 years. And one way of looking at our investments, we have a diverse set, a diverse portfolio. We have both stocks, equities, but we also have, fixed rate assets. We have we also have some alternative investments. Whatever our mix is, that's really the investment risk of the controller. And the controller does approve the long-term asset allocation study. What the most recent long-term asset allocation study showed is that the expected return over the next 5 years was 6.07%. So, looking at that and looking at other studies that have been done and the thing that actuaries have been talking about across the country, we felt it was prudent to lower our assumed rate of return to 5.9%. So, and by itself, that decrease in the return assumption would have increased employer rates, but there were other gains that were used to allow us to also to lower the assumed rate of return at rate of return at the same time lowering employer contribution rates, and that is spelled out here. One of the things we've done this with this fiscal year is we're doing what we call a market restart and trying to take all the gains from the record return and in this year to help us make sure we have stable contribution rates in the future by lowering our assumed rate of return to what we think is a reasonable rate of return. So what's the end result for you? So the good news is that for the expected total employer contributions next year, we'll be asking employers for a total of $4.4 billion. That's actually $1.5 billion less in employer contributions than this most recent year. And this is the lowest level since 2011. One thing to remember is that we're paying out over $1 billion in billion in pensions every month, and actually that's about 600 million more than we take in from employer contributions, and we were doing that by carefully planning our assets and deciding what to sell off. And some people say, oh my God, you're taking in less than what you're paying out. But this is something that the actuary planned for a long time. We knew this was coming given the demographics of our members, and we're very well poised to pay out those benefits now and into the future. We feel lowering the assumed rate of return, that means that, in this fiscal year that's to end soon, provided that we hit the 5.9% assumed rate of return, employers' contributions will be stable, and we have a higher likelihood of hitting a 5.9% assumed rate of return versus the 6.8% assumed return was, higher than we anticipated that we would hit. So again, we're starting this smoothing with this valuation. If there was any uptick, a lowering of investment returns and an uptick in employer contribution rates, there is the contribution stabilization program available to employers. But under all these new assumptions, the bottom line is we're 99.3% funded. So that's an important thing. I'll stop there for a second because I know that was a lot of complicated information, and see if anyone has any questions about contribution rates and the assumed rate of return. Okay, we can also address it at the end of the presentation. I want to talk a little bit more about the contribution stabilization program. So there are two different programs. One was started after the Great Recession, and we saw a big spike in contribution rates. Contribution rates since then have been coming down. An alternate program was established later on, and that allowed for amortizing a portion of pensions. If you're in the original program, you could amortize over 10 years. If you're in the alternate program, and 41 employers chose to do that at the time, there was a short window for participating in that. They can amortize over 12 years. It's an optional program, but once you participate in it, you are part of the program. Employers can basically amortize a portion of their payments when rates are high, and they can prepay these amounts at any time, but they would be paying an interest charge, but the interest charge was pretty close to whatever we were receiving in return for fixed rate securities. And actually the interest rate has, over the last few years, has been fairly low because fixed rate securities haven't had a high return. So each year, if you participate in this program, you pay a graded rate, and how the rate goes up and down was established in law. And for the most part, since the program has been in place, the graded rate has been lower than the normal contribution rate. We did see some changes. Think about it, when these programs were put into effect, it was really before there was tier 5 and 6. We've seen some employers with more tier 5 and 6 members have lower costs. And so we're seeing a difference in graded rates and contribution rates. And we actually, our actuary recommended, and we asked the legislature to make some changes to allow the graded rate that employers would pay under this program to be more tailored to the tier and plan demographics of each specific employer. But this year coming up, we have something that hasn't happened before, which is the annual contribution rate. The graded rate will be higher than the normal contribution rate. So when the graded rate is higher than the normal rate, employers who have been participating in this program are required to pay the higher graded rate. And the difference, the excess payments between over and above the normal rate for the graded rate will be used to pay back any existing amortizations that the employer has. But what we've been seeing, the good news is employers have been able to pay off their amortizations. And we've got some employers who have paid off all of their amortizations. They still, under the current law, are required to pay the graded rate, and then any excess is deposited into a reserve account and will be used to offset increases in contribution rates in the future. And we actually have dozens more employers who will be paying in the graded rate, and we'll have monies going into a reserve fund. And we are tracking that information and the returns on those funds for those employers. Does anyone have any questions on the contribution stabilization program? Okay. These slides just list out, I was talking about the various rates that employers have been paying. This shows over the years, the various, going back to 1976, the average rates that employers have paid. They have been going down. We had the blip with the fiscal year when this past year when they went up due to the pandemic. but they are coming down again. And then this is just another way of taking a look at the contribution rate trends. This is the makeup of our common retirement fund. As I mentioned, we have a very diversified portfolio. There's actually, the retirement and Social Security law does limit the investments that can be made in certain security, certain things like alternatives, and we constantly monitor those returns to see where we are in terms of making sure we're within the legislative requirements as far as the types of investments. And we're also monitoring our own, we set our asset allocation with the asset allocation study, and we try to stay within, what we lay out as far as the plan for investments. And these are just the returns over the years. And what this slide shows is, the returns that we've achieved. And in many of the years, we exceeded the assumed rate of return, and in other years, we were below it. But, our philosophy is we're in it for the long term. We're long-term investors, and, we always bounce back. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that have changed with COVID-19. What the good news is we didn't skip a beat as far as paying out pensions and benefits, and we continue to do so. We appreciate that employers have been great and able to report and enroll members through Retirement Online. And I know, we all struggled in the beginning with working remotely and things like that, but we've been in a very good cadence with employers as far as reporting. And so we appreciate that partnership. We did open up and increase the number of things that members could do through Retirement Online and member self-service. So that actually was a great thing that happened in parallel with the pandemic. We are conducting hearings remotely, and actually everyone seems to be very happy with that. And we're actually getting more hearings done doing that remotely. We used to do in-person consultations for retirements, and we're now doing the phone consultations remotely by phone, or we also do video consultations. And we've gotten good feedback as well on that. We've been able to get more people into phone consultations, and also because of member self-service, they now have members have a tool where the benefit estimate is tied to their specific account information. So they're able to run a whole bunch of what if scenarios on retirement. Plus we send the information out to the member prior to the phone consultation. So they're going in, I think, with eyes wide open with their phone consultation. And we're doing a lot of presentations virtually for employers and members. The one thing we continue to do is try to promote direct deposit of our retirees. And we actually, really did a push for that, because we have seen a slowness in the mail. And, we've got over 95% of our retirees are using direct deposit. There were a number of different executive orders throughout the pandemic that affected the retirement system. Most of them have been discontinued, but there is one that still continues, and that's what we call the Section 212 waiver. Right now, well, under retirement law, generally retirees who are under the age of 65 are limited in what they can earn post-retirement for a public employer. And that cap right now is $35,000 in a calendar year. But there have been a number of different times, actually since the beginning of the pandemic, where March 27th, 2020, where the governors have issued executive orders saying that they waived retiree earnings because one, with the shortage of employees due to the pandemic, many local governments needed to rely on bringing people back to get certain jobs done. And we wanted to be able to do that. And so these are all the periods of time, it's by calendar year, in which retiree earnings do not count towards the waiver. Right now, that waiver is through March 1st, 2022. And we do expect the governor to extend that waiver for an additional amount of time. The other thing that was established with COVID-19 was an additional death benefit. I know early on in the pandemic, there was a real concern that many public workers were going to work and could be exposed to COVID-19 and could die as a result. And so there was a provision that created a presumption that if you work, you're an active member and work, and if you were to contract COVID-19 because you had been on the job within the last 45 days, there is a presumption that if you die of COVID-19, that you could have contracted COVID-19 in the course of work. And that provides for what we call an accidental death benefit, which works out to be a pension of roughly 50% of a member's final average salary to certain statutory beneficiaries. First, it's a surviving spouse. If no spouse, then dependent children and dependent parents. We have been closely monitoring active member deaths, and we've had a couple hundred of them that were related to COVID. And what we do is we follow up with the beneficiaries to find out, one, if there is a statutory beneficiary, and two, that people are given an option. And in some cases, the member prior to dying may have filed for service retirement or a disability retirement. So the family may prefer that, or in some cases, they may prefer to just have the money up front. It would be an optional death benefit. So we've been working on that. But what we've really seen is like an increase. We've gotten over 2,700 deaths of retirees and beneficiaries related to COVID. There's no COVID death benefit for retirees. So the other thing to keep in mind, because we still are seeing people get sick, gravely sick due to COVID-19, there are some different options for those members, and we've got staff willing and able to talk to folks if there's an emergency. One is that they can file for disability retirement, and if they were to get better, they can just withdraw their disability retirement. Service retirement's a little bit different. They can file for service retirement electronically through Retirement Online, but once you hit the date of retirement, it's you can't change your mind about retiring. So just talk about some quick online tools for employers. There's some new billing functionality that we've unveiled over the last couple of years, and I hope you're finding it useful. Some of the things that's available through the billing dashboard are salary listings. prior year's adjustments. You get to see your estimates, invoices, projections, and GASB information. And it'll be stored there for, for several years for you to have. One of the major efforts underway right now is to help employers transition from reporting their legacy information through Retirement Online and through instead use what we call our enhanced reporting. Our enhanced reporting is a new file format. We are ready, willing, and able to assist every employer with the transition to enhanced reporting. There are a lot of benefits to employers to enhanced reporting, and actually the enhanced reporting system was designed based on a work group we had of employers who provided us with feedback on what would be useful to have. So, you'd get more information real time. It allows for mandatory members to be auto-enrolled. You get all the information you need back on new employees right away. The other thing is that, we'd be like what we see now often is someone may go to work for a public employer and they don't provide, they don't join the retirement system, and years later, we have to track down and confirm whether or not they actually worked for an employer. Employers will be providing information to us on optional members, and we will store that information so we have it down the road. Enhanced reporting will also help with the information that we need at the time that we're gathering at the time of retirement for your employees, but it'll also enable us to store a lot more information up front. So in the future, we'll just have that information, and we won't need to do need to ask you for an upload for that. So we've got about 654 employers who fully transitioned to enhanced reporting, and we've got a number of employers who are transitioning. The target date to move all local employers to enhanced reporting is by the end of this year. We're going to be next year phasing out enhanced reporting. So the sooner you get a chance to take a look, if you haven't already, at enhanced reporting, the better. And we will work with you to get you ready and able to do that. I apologize. I'm working from home today and my phone is ringing. It's probably a wrong number. So here's the information you need to follow up on the next steps for moving to enhanced reporting. And some of our support resources for you are listed here. Just want to mention a couple of things on member self-service. We have seen 380,000 members and retirees sign up for Retirement Online. And as I mentioned, we've introduced over the last couple of years a number of things that they can do through Retirement Online. We're now seeing 50% of retirement applications come in through Retirement Online. 75% of loans are coming in. Updating beneficiaries is a way of getting the information back in real time, and we're seeing more and more members use Retirement Online for that. So to the extent that you can help us market Retirement Online to your employees, we really appreciate it. And what we've been doing is sending you out links so you can just forward it to your employees. So we appreciate that. Just wanted to mention real quickly, for those of you who have elected and appointed officials who are not in a timekeeping system, as you know, there is a different way of reporting them to us. And I know we're in the time period where we've had, new elected and appointed officials who have recently started. And they've, got to keep a 3-month record of activities in their, if they're starting in a new position. And there's, we have a whole process for you providing us with a standard workday resolution and keeping track of what their record of activities are so that we can apply and calculate the proper service credit that the elected official is entitled to. I'm not going to go into great detail because our pension integrity unit does a training on this. What I would suggest is what you might want to do as a future webinar is have our pension integrity staff walk you through and provide you with the presentation on reporting elected and appointed officials. So in this slide, I also have the phone number for an email for pension integrity, and they'd be more than happy to walk you through it. They're also able to speak with any elected official who falls under this regulation and has some questions about how to properly report their or track their activities. So with that, I will take any questions.
So there's nothing in the chat, Colleen. If anyone has any last questions, that would be great. If not, we'll call it a day.
Okay, it's a lot. I know a lot of information in an hour. So, and feel free if Richard, I'll provide you with my email if anyone has any questions after and would like to reach out. I'd be more than happy to respond.
That's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much, Colleen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.